Welcome to the Top 10 at 10. Today is May 1st, 2014. I'm your host, Daniel Wright, writer at firedoglake.com, and these are the top 10 stories. Story number 10 from The Guardian. This is from Seamus Milne. It's not Russia that's pushed Ukraine to the brink of war. The attempt to lever Kiev into the Western camp by ousting an elected leader made conflict certain. It could be a threat to us all. So this is sort of a piece questioning the weird U.S. media propaganda you're seeing right now. Just that to sort of disregard the fact that the U.S. helped overthrow the democratically elected president, and then sort of have this shocked Professor Renault response to the chaos. The threat of war in Ukraine is growing as the unelected government in Kiev declares itself unable to control the rebellion in the country's east. John Kerry brands Russia a rogue state. The U.S. and the European Union step up sanctions against the Kremlin, accusing it of destabilizing Ukraine. The White House is reported to be set on a new Cold War policy with the aim of returning Russia into a, quote, pariah state. That might be more explicable if what is going on in eastern Ukraine now were not the mirror image of what took place in Kiev a couple of months ago. Then it was armed protesters in Maidan Square seizing government buildings and demanding a change of government and constitution. U.S. and European leaders championed the masked militants and denounced the elected government for its crackdown, just as they now back the unelected government's use of force against rebels occupying police stations and town halls in cities such as Slavyansk and Donetsk. America is with you, Senator John McCain told demonstrators, then standing shoulder to shoulder with the leader of the far-right Svoboda party as the U.S. ambassador haggled with the State Department over who would make up the new Ukrainian government. Right, for those who don't know, that's the National Socialist Party. Well, they changed their name. I think it means liberty or freedom now, but it's the same party. It's the National Socialist Party of Ukraine, which John McCain foolishly was taking pictures with, caught taking pictures with. He really is too dumb to be in this game anymore. I think I don't know. He's always been crazy. Maybe early dementia. I'm not sure what's going on, but he's a wild man. When the Ukrainian president was replaced by a U.S. elected administration in an entirely unconstitutional takeover, politicians such as William Hague brazenly misled Parliament about what the legality had taken place, the imposition of a pro-Western government on Russia's most neuralgic and politically divided neighbor. Putin bit back, taking a leaf out of the U.S. street protest playbook, even though, as in Kiev, the protests that spread from Crimea to eastern Ukraine evidently had mass support. What had been a glorious cry for freedom in Kiev became infiltration and insatiable aggression in Sevastopol and Luhansk. I mean, this is a great breakdown because this is exactly what's happened. You've seen the propaganda mill. Everything that the Ukrainian people, protesters, the pro-Western forces did, is now vilified, but it was ennobled when they did it. So it's just, I mean, the amount of the U.S. media is still, particularly the corporate media, is just this propaganda arm for U.S. foreign policy, and it's embarrassing, to put it lightly. But yeah, they don't care. Story number 9. This is from the National Journal, from Edward Snowden, or rather about Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden, NSA spies most on Americans. Edward Snowden told a crowd of fans Wednesday that the government's surveillance program collects more data on Americans than any other country. Quote, do you think it's right the NSA is collecting more information about Americans in America than it is about Russians in Russia? Snowden said. Because that's what our systems do. We watch our own people more closely than we watch any other population in the world. Snowden also took several shots at the National Security Agency and its top officials and criticized the agency for wearing two contradictory hats of protecting U.S. data and exploiting security flaws to gather intelligence. Quote, U.S. government policy directed by the NSA is now making a choice, a binary choice between security of our communications and the vulnerability of our communications, unquote. The former NSA contractor was awarded the Rittenhour Award for truth-telling, along with Laura Poitras, one of his chief confidants. The 30-year-old fugitive remains in Russia, where he fled and earned temporary asylum following his disclosures of classified information about the NSA's bulk collection practices. Yeah, I mean, it's about, that's who they care about, controlling Americans. That's the whole point of controlling. That's the whole point about, national security, quote unquote. It's to secure the ruling elite. That's the point of it. I mean, that's not even conspiratorial. That's the point of national security, to secure the status quo. And if you think the status quo is geared towards oligarchy, as all, I mean, social science research now, is Princeton's putting this out, which is funny, and acknowledge that there is an oligarchy. Well, if you're trying to preserve the status quo, there you go. This is an important story, story number 8. This is about BuzzFeed is this sort of kind of awful thing on the internet that not only steals content, but is just generally stupefying and also apparently a shill for power. This is from brainpickings.org by Maria Popova. In 1995, more than 20 years after this, irreverent illustrations for Alice in Wonderland. So she basically put these photos up, and this was apparently stolen and then placed on BuzzFeed, which is kind of interesting, I thought. So another example. Story number 7. This is from Nature, which is a pretty important scientific journal. The World Health Organization warns against post-antibiotic era. Agency recommends global system to monitor spread of resistant microbes. The post-antibiotic era is near, according to a report released yesterday by the World Health Organization. The decreasing effectiveness of antibiotics and other antimicrobial agents is a global problem, and a surveillance system should be established to monitor it, the group says. There's nothing hopeful in the WHO, World Health Organization's report, which pulls together data from 129 member states to show extensive resistance to antimicrobial agents in every region of the world. Overuse of antibiotics in agriculture to promote livestock growth and in hospitals quickly leads to proliferation of drug-resistant bacteria, which then spread via humans, travel, and poor sanitation practices. Quote, a post-antibiotic era in which common infections and minor injuries can kill, far from being an apocalyptic fantasy, is instead a very real possibility for the 21st century. Perhaps the most worrying trend is the spread of resistance to carbapeniums, the antibiotics of last resort, says Timothy Walsh, a medical microbiologist at Cardiff University, UK, who was an advisor for the report. Quote, that's taken us by surprise, he says. All of us rather like rabbits in front of the headlights. All of us are rather like rabbits in front of the headlights, and how quickly this has taken off. I guess that's how they say it over there. I mean, here it's deer in the headlights, but okay. The report finds that in some areas of the world, more than half the infections caused by one major category of bacteria, gram-negative, which includes Escherichia coli and Klebsiella pneumonia, involves species resistant to carbapenem drugs. There are few, if any, replacements for carbapenems in development, says Elizabeth Youngman, Director of Drug Safety and Innovation at the Pew Charitable Trust in Washington, D.C. Companies lack economic incentives to develop new antibiotics. No, they'd rather develop new penis pills. She says, and researchers have found it difficult to find new ways to get gram-negative bacteria to take up antibiotics. So, get ready for the zombie apocalypse. Story number 6. This is, I don't know, this is, the authenticity of this is still unknown, but there's this, something put to Pastebin that I thought was just very interesting, which is about how Google, according to this statement, and this is Pastebin, so you can't, I don't know what to do with it, in which they allege that basically AdSense started, in order to make more money, I guess to hit a quota, an internal quota, started blocking or banning users right before they had to pay them from AdSense, so which is very problematic. To sum it up for everyone, I took part in what I and many others would consider theft of money from the publishers by Google and from direct orders of management. There were many AdSense employees involved, and it spanned many years, and I hear it still is happening today, except on a much wider scale. No one on the outside knows it. If they did, the FBI and possibly IRS would immediately launch an investigation because what they are doing is so inherently illegal, and they are flying completely under the radar. So they wait till they have to pay someone, and then they ban them from AdSense. And so a lot of the people don't even know they're going to get paid. So it's kind of interesting. This apparently happened in 2009. Any AdSense account that reaches the $10,000 month mark is immediately flagged unless they are part of the green group. So they're flagged, and they try to get rid of them before they have to pay them. So interesting what's going on with AdSense. I mean, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. The sourcing is non-existent, obviously, but we'll see. Story number 6. Actually, story number 5. This is from the Globe and Mail. Merkel rules out military intervention over dispute in Ukraine. German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Wednesday ruled out military intervention in the dispute with Russia over Ukraine and said she was counting on a diplomatic resolution in Europe's worst crisis since the Cold War ended. In a speech to about 1,200 people in Frankfurt, Germany's financial capital, ahead of the European parliamentary elections next month, Merkel said the lessons of 2 world wars in the last century could not be forgotten. Well, what we have learned, would we have learned anything 100 years after the start of World War I and 75 years from the start of World War II if we resorted to the same methods? No, unquote, said Merkel, whose country has a deeply pacifist streak after those wars. I'll continue working towards a good partnership with Russia, said Merkel. Germany, which relies heavily on Russia for natural gas supplies, has been trying to diffuse tensions over Ukraine and is seen in the West as reluctant to ratchet up sanctions against Moscow. An opinion poll for ARD television on Wednesday evening showed that 72% of Germans were worried about the return of a Cold War between Russia and the rest, while only 18% are in favor of military support for Ukraine. 18%. That's a low one. Story number 4. The FCC chairman says all options are open for net neutrality. Tom Wheeler had a bracing message for attendees at the National Cable Show being held this week in LA when it comes to his new rules for net neutrality, which consumer groups complained would allow the creation of a for-pay internet fast lane. Cable companies should put away the party hats. His open internet rules, designed to comply with court rulings that remanded the FCC's previous ones, will be tough and will be enforceable and will be in effect with dispatch. What's more, all options are on the table. If internet providers still tip the scales to favor certain services, then you would consider reclassifying the web to make it a regulated common carrier service instead of largely unregulated information service. I know in my bones how hard it is to start a company with innovative ideas. Now, as chairman of the FCC, I do not intend to allow the innovation to be strangled by the manipulation of the most important network of our time, the internet. He adds that cable companies should back off from their efforts to persuade states to bar municipalities from creating competitive broadband systems The FCC, quote, has the power, and I intend to exercise that power to preempt state laws that ban competition from community broadband. It's a weak BS, to be honest. But the full comments are here. Story number 3, Rob Ford takes leave as a recent drug video emerges. So he got caught on video, I think, smoking crack again. The second video of Toronto Mayor Rob Ford smoking what has been described as crack cocaine by a self-professed drug dealer was secretly filmed in his sister's basement early Saturday morning. The clip, which was viewed by 2 Globe and Mail reporters, shows Mr. Ford taking a drag from a long copper-colored pipe, exhaling a cloud of smoke, and then frantically shaking his right hand. The footage is part of the package of 3 videos that the drug dealer says he surreptitiously shot around 1:15 a.m., in which he says he is now selling for, quote, at least 6 figures. The footage comes to light weeks after Mr. Ford embarked on a re-election campaign styled on the importance of second chances and forgiving mistakes. Nearly a year ago, the mayor thrust himself into the worldwide infamy when another drug dealer, Mohammed Saeed, tried to sell another video of the mayor allegedly smoking crack to media outlets in Canada and the United States. At the time, the mayor denied using the drug, only to later admit that he had smoked crack cocaine in a, quote, drunken stupor, unquote, and says he was not an addict. Oh boy. And that's about it for Rob Ford, I would imagine. Story number 2, speaking of abrupt resignations or quitting, top two Pentagon intelligence officials abruptly quit. Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn abruptly announced his retirement Wednesday as head of the Defense Intelligence Agency after what current and former officials said were clashes with his bosses and other opponents inside the Pentagon spy service. Flynn's deputy, David Arshad, is also retiring, according to a statement from the agency. The agency collects and analyzes foreign intelligence to support the U.S. military. The better-known CIA is a civilian agency that reports to the president. A senior defense official said Flynn, who took over the agency in July 2012, clashed repeatedly with his superior, Michael Vickers, the Pentagon's undersecretary for intelligence. He was trying to take DIA in a direction the rest of the department didn't want to go. The former agency official and Flynn supporter said Flynn was undermined by, quote, an old guard at the agency who resisted changes he wanted to make. He sought to cut what he viewed as outdated intelligence programs in favor of allocating resources to newer threats, including cyber. General Flynn wanted to take advantage of the budget pressures and the demand for more adaptive agency to bring changes and find efficiencies. DIA is a bloated bureaucracy with overstaffed analytical elements still focusing on requirements that have been overtaken by applications and technology, unquote. Okay. And the number 1 story from FDL, yours truly, going after big banks, never a real priority at the Department of Justice. A new report from ProPublica claims that part of the reason none of the major Wall Street banks were prosecuted for their role in causing the 2008 financial crisis was a disinterest in taking on cases by the U.S. Department of Justice. The disinterest reportedly led to prosecutors not pursuing winnable cases and coincided with other concerns, such as the possibility of losing a case. As a result, no executives from the major Wall Street firms went to jail for causing the financial crisis, despite the firms themselves paying out billions in civil fines. Instead, insider trading became the focus of DOJ, a chronic problem with no particular relevance to the financial crisis. And the quote in here is, the insider trading cases made our careers, but they don't change the world. In fact, several former prosecutors in the office told me that going after bankers was never a real priority. The government failed, another former prosecutor said. We didn't do what we needed to do. According to another prosecutor, former DOJ Criminal Division head Lanny Brewer's staff did not want to quote, pursue cases where they feel the person is 100% guilty, but they're only 70% sure they can win a trial, unquote, which is a pretty amazing standard, a standard likely to occur often with complex financial cases where a prosecutor runs the risk of having a jury not being able to understand the crime exactly. Of course, bringing cases to trial for people you believe are 100% guilty is not just about winning those cases. It is also supposed to send a message about the rule of law, and when prosecutors take a dive continually, for whatever reason, the opposite message is sent. And that message has been sent. Break the law if you can get away with it. I mean, that's really the message. Or get big enough to break the law and get away with it. And that is the top 10 at 10. If you have a story you'd like me to feature in the top 10 at 10, please tweet me at Dan S. Wright. And be sure to read all the stories at firedog lake.com. Thanks for watching. Do that.